My wife demanded I quit my job to stay home with the kids, but when I refused, she left with them. Later, she filed for divorce, painting me as the absent and neglectful father. Yet, the secret she'd hidden all this time turned everything in my favor. I, 37M, have worked hard my entire life. I grew up in a small town, took a job at the local auto shop as soon as I was out of high school, and slowly worked my way up to running the place. My wife, A, and I got married young, and we've got 2 kids. Our daughter is 9, and our son is 6. I stayed home after our son was born. We both agreed that was the best choice at the time. I was fine with it, and I loved the idea of her being there for the kids while I worked. But something changed with her, and I didn't see it coming. This all kicked off one night about 6 months ago. We were sitting at the dinner table, the kids were being kids, talking about their day at school, and suddenly, A puts down her fork and looks straight at me. "I think you should quit your job and stay home with the kids," she says, completely out of the blue. I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "What?" I asked, thinking I hadn't heard her right. "I'm serious," she says. "I want to go back to school, maybe start my own business. You've been working long enough. It's your turn to stay home with them." I was still trying to process what she'd said. "Are you kidding me?" I asked. "How are we supposed to pay for anything? My job keeps this family afloat." She just shrugged, like it was no big deal. "We can live off savings for a while. You could do some work from home. We'll figure it out." This wasn't something we'd ever discussed before. She'd never mentioned wanting to go back to school, start a business, or anything like that. And live off savings? What savings? Most of our money went to the mortgage, the bills, and the kids. There was barely anything left at the end of the month. And work from home? I'm a mechanic, not some office worker who can just fire up a laptop in the living room. I told her straight up, "I'm not quitting my job. This doesn't make sense. We've got bills, a mortgage, and mouths to feed. We agreed you'd stay home. What's changed?" She got all defensive, accusing me of not supporting her dreams, that I was trying to keep her trapped at home. But it wasn't that at all. I wasn't against her doing something for herself, but quitting my job wasn't the solution. She kept pushing, saying it was only fair that I stay home with the kids now that she had put in her time, and it was my turn. We went back and forth for days, but I didn't budge. A week later, I woke up to an empty house. She was gone, took the kids, and left without a word. I found a note in the kitchen saying she needed time to think and that she was staying with her parents for a while. I tried calling her, texting her, but nothing, radio silence. A week after that, I got served divorce papers. She filed for full custody of the kids, claiming I was never around and didn't care for them. My jaw hit the floor. This wasn't just about her wanting a break, she was trying to take everything. I thought we'd work this out, but now here I was, sitting across from her in a lawyer's office, hearing her say things that didn't even feel like they were about me. "He's not involved with the kids. He doesn't know what they need. I've been doing everything while he's just focused on work." I was stunned. She was lying through her teeth, and the worst part was that she knew it. I wasn't some deadbeat dad. I was busting my ass to keep a roof over our heads, and in the time I did have, I spent it with our kids. I coached my daughter's soccer team, I took my son fishing every weekend. But according to her, I was some absentee father who barely knew our kids existed. Then it got worse. Not only did she want full custody, but she also wanted me to keep paying the mortgage on the house I wouldn't even be living in. She claimed she needed financial support to get back on her feet since she hadn't worked in years. But she wasn't planning to go back to work, she wanted to go to school, maybe start a business, and I was supposed to foot the bill while she did it. I was sitting there, feeling like my whole life was slipping away, and she was acting like this was just business as usual, no emotion, no regret, just cold and entitled. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't completely in the dark. I had my suspicions that something more was going on. A few months before all this, I noticed some weird charges on our joint account, dinners at fancy restaurants, gifts, hotel stays. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was nothing, just treating herself after a tough week with the kids. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after she filed for divorce, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to believe it, but something in my gut told me I had to. What came back rocked me to my core. She had been seeing someone else, not just anyone, but her old high school boyfriend. They'd reconnected on social media, and she'd been using our money to go visit him 2 states away, bringing the kids along to make it look like she was just visiting family. She was buying him gifts, taking him out on our dime, all while I was working myself to the bone to support our family. I was furious, but I didn't confront her right away. I held on to the information, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during one of our custody hearings. She kept pushing the narrative that I was a neglectful father, that she was the primary caregiver, and that I should be paying for everything while she figured out her next move. When my lawyer presented the evidence of her affair and how she'd been misusing our joint funds, everything shifted. The judge took one look at the documentation and tore into her. Her credibility was shot. The judge questioned whether she could even provide a stable environment for the kids, considering she'd been dragging them across state lines to visit some guy behind my back. It was a hard moment, not because I felt sorry for her, but because the kids were the ones who'd have to deal with the fallout. I hated that they were caught in the middle of all this, but there was no way I was going to let her win after everything she'd done. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor, joint custody, no alimony, and I got to keep the house. She was ordered to pay back a portion of the money she'd spent on her little affair, which was satisfying, But it didn't fix the damage she'd done. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Nope. She wasn't done yet. After the ruling, she started pulling all kinds of petty crap. She'd forget to drop the kids off on my weekends or claim they were sick at the last minute. When I did get them, she'd fill their heads with lies, telling them I didn't want them or that I was the reason we weren't a family anymore. It was beyond infuriating, but I tried to keep my cool for the kids' sake. I didn't want them to see how messed up things were between us. After months of this, I'd had enough. I took her back to court for contempt. The judge wasn't impressed with her games and threatened her with fines if she didn't stick to the custody schedule. That seemed to snap her back into reality, at least for a while. The drop-offs got smoother, and the kids seemed to be adjusting to the new routine. But things between us were completely broken. Anytime we had to talk, it was cold and businesslike. I still couldn't believe the person I'd spent nearly half my life with had turned into this stranger who was so willing to destroy everything for her own selfish reasons. It's been a few months now since everything settled down. The kids are doing okay, all things considered. I try to shield them from the worst of it, but I know they're still confused. They don't understand why things went down the way they did, and I'm careful about how I talk about their mom in front of them. As angry as I am, I don't want them to hate her. She's still their mother, and they love her. But I can't ignore what she did or how she treated me, and, by extension, them. There are days when I wonder how we got here, how things went from what I thought was a happy marriage to this mess. One minute we were a family, the next, she's gone, chasing some fantasy with a guy from her past. I never saw it coming, but I guess that's how life goes sometimes. I'm still picking up the pieces, figuring out what the future looks like now that I'm a single dad trying to balance work, custody schedules, and everything else. But one thing's for sure, I'm not letting her rewrite the narrative. She tried to paint me as the bad guy, but the truth came out in the end.